All right. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Dieffenbachia. There are many different varieties of the Dieffenbachia. What I have in front of me here is a Dieffenbachia camilla. You may have seen Dieffenbachia reflector. There are many different varieties of Dieffenbachia, but you're going to care for all of them in very similar ways. Dieffenbachias are also known as dumb canes because they are a very toxic plant. The sap actually contains these little crystals that whenever they come in contact with any kind of mucous membrane, it's going to cause irritation, swelling. So the name dumb cane actually comes from if you were to eat one of the leaves here, your throat would start to swell and your tongue would swell, and it would make you sound dumb, to put it kind of frankly. So care tips for the Dieffenbachia are relatively straightforward. The Dieffenbachia is a low light tolerant houseplant. I have mine in a medium to bright indirect light scenario. I would not recommend giving any of your Dieffenbachias bright direct light because of the foliage is not going to really like that. I would definitely keep this in more of a diffused light situation. As I mentioned, they do okay in lower light scenarios. However, if you really want to push out new growth, especially during the growing season, I would recommend you give it more of a medium to bright indirect light situation. So watering for the Dieffenbachia is also relatively straightforward. Similar to like a spathiphyllum or a Dracaena, you're going to want to keep the soil a little bit on the moist side. I wouldn't let it dry out completely like a succulent because the foliage is relatively thin. And these will have pretty obvious signs of when it's time to water them as well. So your foliage is going to start to droop and you might even see some kind of like shriveling, just simple signs of dehydration like that. So keep your soil moist, not wet, well-draining mixture for your soil. As with all houseplants, really, you want to have a decent amount of drainage in your plant soil. As for fertilizer, the Dieffenbachia does tend to have pretty large amounts of foliage. And for this reason, I would just recommend like a simple 20-20-20 fertilizer, or you could use like worm castings or eggshell. Any kind of fertilizer like that would do perfectly fine with the Dieffenbachia. Because these are more of a subtropical plant, I would absolutely recommend that you keep them in a higher humidity situation. I've noticed that my Dieffenbachias really benefit from the occasional misting, as well as I do tend to keep the humidity very high in the house as well. For that very reason, it definitely makes the plants a little bit happier. So I would be cautious with your Dieffenbachia if over-fertilizing, as well as not using filtered water or even distilled water. I've noticed that there are some browning on the tips of certain Dieffenbachias that I have, which more often than not I equate to fertilizer burn or some kind of mineral buildup, or due to like the chlorine or the fluoride in tap water. So I make sure to give the Dieffenbachia, just like I would with a Dracaena or even a prior plant, a Calathea, distilled water is going to be best. So pest for your Dieffenbachia, I haven't noticed many pests on any of my Dieffenbachias. One of them did have some spider mites on it, and that was not too hard of a remedy to fix. I just used some neem oil and took care of that. And I haven't noticed any like scale or mealybugs or anything like that on my other Dieffenbachias. So I would say they're not the most pest-tolerant houseplants. And there is a lot of places for pests to hide on Dieffenbachias as well because the stems are relatively long and you have all these leaves shooting off of the stems. That's like a really ideal hiding place for a lot of pests. So just keep an eye on your Dieffenbachia. Overall, the Dieffenbachia is a really interesting houseplant. Pretty easy to care for, and it does just grow upright in this kind of like tree-like pattern. And it's very normal for you to lose lower parts of your Dieffenbachia. So you can see I don't have a whole lot of foliage on the underside of this plant. A lot of the growth just comes out of this area of the plant where it's, you know, growing from the top, and it's very normal, just like with a Dracaena or any kind of tree-like plant, for the lower leaves to shed, particularly in the winter months or as you approach the winter months. That's kind of like a hibernation sort of phase, we'll call it, for the houseplant. So it can store energy and not expend as much energy in keeping that lower foliage, which isn't doing a whole lot for the plant, and getting rid of that less efficient part of the plant. So overall, the Dieffenbachia is a pretty rewarding houseplant to grow. It's very pretty, especially different cultivars and different varieties like the Dieffenbachia reflector are really beautiful. So keep an eye out for Dieffenbachias. They're relatively easy to care for. If you have any pets like cats, dogs, or even small children that get into houseplants, I would not recommend the Dieffenbachia. As mentioned, it is a toxic houseplant. But yeah, besides that, that is all you need to know about the Dieffenbachia for the most part. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and happy growing. Bye.